My scamming stepmom told my dad, "It's me or your wife's deadbeat son. Kick him out or I'm done." She thought she was clever, but I uncovered bankruptcies, ruined families, and used every receipt to burn her scheme to the ground. Hey, Reddit. About a year after my mom passed, my dad married Helene. She thought she could erase my mom's memory and bleed my dad dry. What she didn't know? I was already 10 steps ahead. Mom died fast. Pancreatic cancer doesn't waste time. And within 6 months of diagnosis, she was gone. One minute I was bringing her tea while she sat in her favorite chair. The next I, Alex, 28 male, was standing graveside watching my father turn into a shell of himself. Connor Collins wasn't just my dad. He was Boston's guy. Big architect. Every Sunday he flipped pancakes. Every summer we sailed. Every award ceremony he was front row clapping like I'd won a Nobel. My mom, Rebecca, was the anchor. Nurse, smart, steady, the type of woman people trusted immediately. They were the couple people envied. And then cancer ripped it apart. After she died, Dad fell hard. The man who could bend steel with math couldn't bend his own grief. He stopped sketching buildings, stopped eating properly, just sat in the garden staring at her flowers like maybe she'd walk back out and scold him for killing the hydrangeas. I let him be. Grief isn't linear. But then, 8 months later, Dad introduced me to Helene. I wish I could say I didn't see it coming. But Helene had been circling him at his firm for months, the new office manager with that polished vibe that made my skin itch. We met at his Christmas party. Dad led me right to her like he was presenting me with a trophy. "Alex, this is Helene. She's been a huge help at the firm." Helene turned, her perfume hitting me before her voice. "Your father talks about you all the time. So proud of your work in, what was it again? Numbers? Cybersecurity," I said. "I stop people from stealing money. You'd be surprised how many folks fall for scams." Her smile tightened for half a beat. "Oh, how noble." Dad beamed like she'd just quoted Shakespeare. I nodded politely, but in my head, red sirens. My entire job is pattern recognition, and Helene was a walking red flag. I'd seen enough scams to know one when I saw one. Still, Dad was smiling. For the first time in months, he wasn't broken, and I wasn't about to stomp on that. 3 months later, Helene was basically living in our house. By month 5, Dad was talking about second chances and finding joy again. By month 6, he called me with the big announcement. "Alex," he said, voice shaky but excited. "I asked Helene to marry me." I almost dropped my coffee. "You barely know her. Life is short, son. She makes me feel alive again." Alive again. That was his line. I couldn't even argue. Not without sounding like the cold-hearted son who wanted him miserable. So I said nothing. He took my silence as approval. The wedding was rushed. Small. Nothing like the celebration he'd had with Mom. The ceremony ended with champagne, Helene soaking up every bit of attention, and Dad standing there like a man who thought he'd been rescued. I clapped, smiled for the photos, but inside, I knew. This wasn't a rescue. It was a setup. I tried to tell myself I was being paranoid, that maybe she really cared about him. But the way her eyes flicked around the room, sizing up people like chess pieces, told me otherwise. She wasn't in love. She was in position. And Dad, lonely, grieving, desperate, was too blinded by Alive Again to see it. That night, back in my New York apartment, I poured a drink and stared out the window at the skyline. My phone buzzed with a picture from the wedding. Dad and Helene grinning like prom king and queen. I saved the photo, not for sentiment, for evidence. Because deep down, I already knew Helene wasn't a chapter in Dad's healing story. She was the opening act in something much uglier. Helene wasted no time marking her territory. First thing she did was bulldoze Mom's kitchen layout like it was a crime scene. Mom designed that kitchen herself. Every drawer, every shelf, even the spot where the cast iron skillet lived. Helene walked in and declared it inefficient. Dad muttered something about, "Your mother liked it this way." But Helene smiled sweetly and said, "We all need to move forward, Connor. And she would like you to move forward too." He caved. Then she eyed my old bedroom. "This would make the perfect home yoga space," she announced at dinner, casually stabbing a fork into her quinoa like she was hosting HGTV. "Since Alex is only here temporarily." I raised an eyebrow. "Temporarily?" Dad stared at his plate. Helene gave me that fake smile, the kind where her eyes go flat. "Well, you're 25. Shouldn't you be focused on building your own life? Boston traffic isn't exactly a playground." Translation: "Don't get too comfortable, kid." I didn't take the bait. Instead, I leaned back and said, "Sure, I'll pack up right after you bring back Mom's hydrangeas you dug up last week." Deal? She didn't like that. But the real play came with what I now call the car situation. Helene decided that to survive dangerous Boston traffic, she absolutely needed a luxury SUV. Not just any SUV either. A top-of-the-line German model with a price tag that made my dad's eyebrows twitch. "Connor," she said one evening, her voice syrupy, "I just don't feel safe driving an old car around here. You wouldn't want me to get hurt, would you?" I wanted to jump in and remind her Boston traffic is annoying, not Fallujah, but I stayed quiet. Dad gave the usual half-protest, then folded like he was allergic to conflict. A week later, Helene rolled into the driveway with a brand new SUV, grinning like she'd just conquered Rome. The problem? Mom's Subaru was gone. That car wasn't just metal and tires. It was the car Mom used to drive me to sailing lessons. The one she stubbornly held onto even when she could have upgraded. Gone. Sold. I found the listing online later that night. One owner, well-maintained, priced to move. The photos were still in our driveway. That was the part that set me off. Helene didn't just sell it. She did it without a word to me. At dinner, I dropped my little grenade. Guess sentimental value doesn't come with heated seats. Dad's fork froze halfway to his mouth. Helene blinked like she didn't understand the jab. "It was outdated," she said. "Unsafe, really. I did us a favor. U.S." As if she'd earned the right to include herself in that sentence. Dad cleared his throat. "Alex, your mother's car was old. Maybe it was time." "Right," I said, leaning back with a smile that wasn't a smile. Because nothing says moving on like selling off the last piece of Mom and buying yourself German engineering. Helene opened her mouth to fire back, but Dad cut her off. "Enough. The decision's been made." Of course it had. The car wasn't just about transportation. It was about control. Every move she made chipped away at Dad's backbone, and she wasn't stopping with the car. Next came the friends. Dad's sailing buddies used to drop by with beers, swapping stories about regattas, asking when he'd get back out on the water. They stopped coming around. At first I thought maybe Dad was pulling away, but then I caught Helene in the act. One afternoon, Dad's phone rang while he was outside tinkering with the grill. I saw the caller ID, Mark, his oldest sailing buddy. Helene picked it up, lowered her voice, and said, "Connor is napping. I'll tell him you called." Then she hung up and slid the phone back like nothing happened. I stepped into the kitchen doorway. "Didn't realize you were the gatekeeper now." Her eyes flicked up, cold. "I'm just protecting his rest. Stress isn't good for him." "Yeah," I said dryly. "God forbid he remembers he had a life before quinoa bowls and SUVs." That earned me a glare sharp enough to cut glass. Dad came back in, none the wiser, flipping burgers while Helene smiled at him like a saint. He had no idea his lifelines, his friends, were being cut one by one. By the end of that month, the house felt different. Less like a home, more like a showroom. Helene was staging for buyers who'd never show up. Mom's photos were quietly swapped out for framed glamour shots of Helene and Dad. The garden Mom planted with her own hands was being redesigned into something modern and sterile. Dad went along with it, convincing himself this was normal, that he was adapting. Me? I wasn't adapting. I was watching, documenting, making mental notes. The kitchen wasn't just rearranged. The car wasn't just sold. The friends weren't just distant. Helene wasn't simply adjusting. She was erasing. Piece by piece, she was rewriting the past and controlling the present. And Dad, still desperate to feel alive again, was letting her. I didn't fight her directly. Not yet. Sarcasm here and there, sure. But I wasn't about to give her the fight she wanted. People like Helene feed on drama. They thrive when you swing wild. I wasn't going to swing. I was going to study, wait, strike only when it mattered. That's the thing about being a cyber guy. I don't rush. I probe. I test. I find the weak point in the system, and then I exploit it. Helene thought she was installing herself as queen of the house. What she didn't know was that she'd already been flagged, and I had all the patience in the world to watch her hang herself with her own rope. She wanted me out. She wanted the past erased. She wanted Dad isolated and compliant. Fine. Let her think she was winning. Because every scammer has a pattern. And every pattern, eventually, cracks. And Helene? She was one bad move away from showing her hand. It didn't take long. The cracks came faster than I expected, like she couldn't help herself. The more she thought she had Dad wrapped around her finger, the bolder she got. She started dropping casual lines at dinner about joint accounts and retirement planning. At first, Dad brushed her off, but I noticed he got quieter with every suggestion. She framed it like concern. "Don't you trust me, Connor?" was her favorite line, always with that fake little laugh, like she was the one being generous. Then came the credit cards. I'd started checking the mail more often when I was home, and one day I pulled a statement out of the recycling bin. 30 grand in charges, designer bags, spa treatments, even cash advances. I slipped it into my pocket and didn't say a word. Better to keep the receipts. But the real showdown came on a Sunday night. Dinner started normal enough. Helene cooked one of her health-focused meals. Quinoa and something green Dad poked at like it was punishment. I was halfway through my plate when Helene dropped it. "Connor," she said, her voice a little too calm. "This tension isn't sustainable. Either Alex leaves this house and moves on with his life, or I do." The words landed like a hammer. She didn't even look at me, just stared straight at Dad, daring him to choose. I waited. Surely this was the moment he'd snap out of it. Surely he'd laugh and tell her to get over herself. Instead, he froze, fork in midair, eyes flicking between us like a trapped animal. "Connor," Helene pressed, her tone sharpening. "I can't live like this anymore." "I won't." The silence stretched. Then Dad finally spoke. "Alex," he said, and his voice was soft, too soft. "Maybe it would be better if you went back to New York. You're an adult now. You have your own life to build." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. It never came. Helene leaned back, triumphant, like she'd just won a chess game she barely knew the rules to. "It's for the best," she added sweetly. I kept my face calm. No outburst, no begging, just one cold, surgical line. "Didn't realize spineless was your new look, Dad? Strongest man I knew? Now you can't even say no at your own table." His face crumpled, but he didn't argue. He didn't defend me. He didn't take it back. That was the moment I knew. He wasn't choosing her because she was smarter, or stronger, or better. He was choosing her because he was weak, because it was easier to bend than to fight. I excused myself without another word, walked to my room, shut the door, and pulled out the emergency bag I'd packed weeks ago. Documents, photos, Mom's jewelry, a hard drive of everything I'd already collected on Helene. I'd known this was coming. Now it was here. I packed the rest methodically. No wasted movements, no second thoughts. When I was done, I scribbled a short note and left it on the desk. "I love you too much to watch this happen. When you're ready to talk without her, call me. Until then, don't expect me to clap for your bad decisions." At 11:30 p.m., their bedroom light went out. 10 minutes later, I slipped out the door with my bags. I didn't look back at the house, not once. I crashed at my friend's Jason place. He had better building security and didn't ask questions until I was ready. The first night was the hardest. It wasn't just leaving my childhood home. It was realizing my dad, the guy I'd looked up to my whole life, had just sold me out to keep the peace with a woman who didn't deserve a seat at the table. He texted me the next morning. "Hope you got settled in okay. Let's grab dinner soon. Just us." I read it twice, waiting for the apology that never came. All he wanted was a neat little reset. Pretend the ultimatum didn't happen. Pretend I hadn't been kicked out like unwanted furniture. Helene thought she'd won. She probably celebrated that night, smug and satisfied. But what she didn't know was that pushing me out didn't end the fight. It just moved it. Now I was free. Free to build my case without her watching over my shoulder. Free to gather every piece of evidence, every slip-up, every financial breadcrumb she left behind. I wasn't leaving the battlefield. I was just switching positions. And Helene? She had no idea I'd already started the counterattack. Because the thing about scammers is they always get greedy. They always go too far. And when she did, I'd be ready. She thought this was checkmate. She had no idea she'd just given me the opening move. Being out of the house wasn't a loss. It was an upgrade. No more pretending to eat quinoa lasagna. No more watching her drip poison into my dad's ear. From Jason's spare bedroom, I turned my situation into what I do best, building a case. I wasn't a son anymore. I was a cyber analyst running a hostile op, and Helene was the hostile target. First step, surveillance. Before I left, I'd slipped a small Wi-Fi camera in my old room, angled just right. Helene had been snooping through my stuff for weeks, and I wasn't about to waste that. Within days, I had clips of her rifling through my drawers, snapping pictures of old bank statements I'd deliberately left behind as decoys, even testing combos on a small safe I used to keep documents. Ashley later had the footage authenticated and cleared for the civil case, so it wasn't just leverage. It was admissible. Rookie mistake on her part. She thought I was gone, but I was still in the house digitally. Second step, OSINT. People like Helene leave trails, and I knew where to look. Public court records, social media caches, old marriage licenses, you name it, I dug it up. Within hours, I had 3 names tied to her: Wilson, Daniels, Mitchell. 3 bankruptcies, 1 foreclosure, a string of maxed out credit cards. Every time she tanked her own finances, She found a wealthier guy to rescue her. The pattern practically screamed serial parasite. I reached out to one of those guys' families. Rick Smith's son, Michael, was easy to find. Corporate lawyer in Chicago. He called me back after one cautious email. So she found another one, he said grimly. My dad was 62 when she married him. Within 2 years, she convinced him to liquidate retirement accounts, change his will, and distance himself from us. By the time he realized, she'd drained over $500,000. Divorce was brutal. He died not long after. Stress killed him, if you ask me. I let him talk, took notes, asked for documents. He sent over court records, transcripts of her testimony. Her tactics were the same: love bombing, isolation, financial bleed. It was like she was running a playbook. Step 3. Follow the money. I brought in Ryan, my buddy who worked in cybersecurity. Together, we set up monitoring on Dad's joint accounts. Nothing illegal, just simple alerts for withdrawals or new credit activity. On top of the $30,000 I'd already seen, within weeks she opened 3 new cards in her name and racked up another $45,000 on jewelry and resellable assets. My gut said she wasn't shopping. She was stockpiling liquidity. Ryan leaned over my laptop one night, smirking. She's prepping for a run. This is classic exit strategy behavior. Yeah, I said, scrolling through transaction logs. She's not shopping. She's cashing out. The final piece came when I stumbled across emails on the shared desktop Dad kept in his office. Helene wasn't exactly subtle. Her password was literally Helene123. Inside were exchanges with a Cayman Islands relocation consultant and an offshore attorney. She wasn't asking about vacation rentals. She was asking about residency options and how to structure banking/assets in low-tax jurisdictions, plus what information sharing rules applied. Since the desktop was Dad's machine and account, access and preservation were by the book. Nothing shady about using it. That was my smoking gun. I didn't storm into the house, waving proof in her face like some amateur. That's what she wanted, for me to come in hot, emotional, easy to dismiss. Instead, I built a file. A timeline of her marriages, her bankruptcies, her aliases, screenshots of her credit card binges, video clips of her rifling through my safe, copies of the Cayman emails, court records from Chicago, Seattle, Miami, every place she'd left a crater behind. I called Ashley, a lawyer friend who specialized in elder financial abuse. We met over coffee, and I slid the folder across the table. She leafed through it, her expression hardening with every page. This isn't just suspicious, she said finally. This is a pattern of exploitation. But your father is still competent. He can make his own choices, even bad ones. So what do I do? Wait until she empties his accounts? No. You build paper trails. Freeze what you can. And when the moment comes, you give him evidence so undeniable he can't rationalize it away. But you don't tip your hand until then. You confront her too early, you lose him. That was the surgical part. Timing. Helene thought she had all the time in the world. She didn't realize every transaction, every lie, every slip-up was being documented with military precision. Meanwhile, I played the role of dutiful son on the outside. Lunches with Dad every 2 weeks, always in public places, never mentioning Helene directly. I talked about work, reminded him of sailing trips, dropped in memories of Mom like small grenades he didn't know how to process. One time, he mentioned Helene wanting him to consider early retirement. She says we should travel while we're young enough to enjoy it. Travel's fine, I said casually. Just make sure you're not retiring on discount. Henderson Tower's still yours, right? That's your legacy. He looked unsettled. The cracks were showing. Good. Then one afternoon, I got a call from Martin, Dad's longtime business partner. Alex, I'm worried. Your father's talking about selling his share of the firm for way below value. He says Helene wants to spend 6 months in Europe. Retirement. Liquidating the firm. It all lined up. She was accelerating the timeline. I sat back in my chair and smiled. Let her push. The faster she plays her hand, the faster I close mine. Because Helene thought she'd forced me off the board. What she didn't know was that every move she made was being tracked, cataloged, and lined up for the moment she wouldn't see coming. She wasn't building a future. She was building a noose. And I was happy to tighten it. The thing about people like Helene is they always overplay their hand. Patience isn't her strong suit. The moment she thought Dad was fully locked in, she started moving faster, louder, bolder. That's when cracks turned into full-on fractures. It was a Tuesday night when the call came. Dad's voice on the other end was shaky, a tone I hadn't heard since the weeks after Mom's funeral. Alex, he said quietly, I think I've made a terrible mistake. Can you meet me? Not at the house, Somewhere private. I didn't hesitate. Murphy's Diner. 30 minutes. When I got there, he was already sitting in our old booth in the corner, the one he used to take me to after soccer practice. Except now he looked different. Smaller somehow, like the weight of the past year had finally caught up with him. He didn't even touch the coffee sitting in front of him. I was going through paperwork for our Italy trip, he started. Visa applications, financial documents. There were discrepancies I couldn't explain. Large withdrawals from accounts I never authorized. How large? I asked, though I already had a good guess. He pulled out his phone, hands trembling slightly. Over 150,000 in just the last 2 months. Helene said it was travel deposits and consultants, but something felt wrong. I leaned back, letting him process the words out loud. For the first time, he wasn't defending her. He was doubting. That's not all, he continued. I checked the safe in my office closet. Documents I'd never seen before. Ownership papers for property in the Cayman Islands. In her name, not ours. And then, he swallowed hard. I found a passport. Same name, but the date of birth was off by 5 years. Why would she lie about something like that? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. His own question hung in the air like smoke. And then today, he said, pulling up a screenshot. She left her phone on the counter. I saw messages with someone named Chester. They were talking about finalizing everything and moving funds offshore. Offshore, Alex. She's planning something I can't ignore anymore. He slid the phone across the table like it burned him. The screen showed Helene's texts in plain black and white. Don't worry, Chester. Once the accounts are clear, he won't know until it's too late. That was it. The fatal flaw in her design. She'd gotten sloppy. I reached into my bag and pulled out the flash drive I'd been carrying for weeks. Dad, I need you to see something. For the next hour, I walked him through everything. The bankruptcies, the name changes, the ex-husbands she drained dry, the testimonies from their families, the screenshots of her emails with a Cayman Islands relocation consultant and an offshore attorney about residency options, asset placement, and banking compliance questions. The credit card binges. The video clips of her rifling through my drawers while I was out. Every piece was organized, time-stamped, undeniable. Dad sat there in stunned silence, his face falling further with each page I showed him. His architect's mind connected the dots quickly. The pattern wasn't subtle anymore. It was a blueprint of fraud. When I finished, he rubbed his temples, eyes glassy. I pushed you away, he said finally, voice breaking. I chose her ultimatum over my own son. And the whole time, you were the only one protecting me. I didn't let him spiral. Save the guilt for later. Right now, we focus on fixing this. She's good, but she's not untouchable. You're not the first man she's conned, but you're going to be the last. He looked at me, the weight of everything crashing down on him. How did I not see it? Because she made sure you didn't, I said simply. That's her game. Isolation, pressure, fake loyalty. You're not blind. You were grieving, and she exploited it. For the first time in months, I saw something in his eyes other than confusion or resignation. Anger. A spark of the man who used to design towers because the ground wasn't tall enough for him. So, what do we do now? He asked. I slid a folder across the table. First, we freeze the accounts. Tomorrow morning, we meet with Ashley. She's already prepped legal moves to protect what's left. We'll secure your firm's equity before she convinces you to undersell it. Then we serve her papers. No drama, no second chances. Just a clean cut backed by evidence. He nodded slowly, absorbing the plan. And if she fights back? She will, I said. She'll cry, scream, accuse, play victim. Doesn't matter. We'll already have every piece lined up. You won't need to argue. The facts will bury her. He leaned back, exhaling like he'd been holding his breath for a year. I should have listened to you from the start. I shook my head. Doesn't matter anymore. What matters is you finally see her for what she is. And you're ready to end it. For the first time, he actually looked relieved. Scared, but relieved. Like finally knowing the truth was easier than living in her carefully crafted lie. We sat there in silence for a moment, just the hum of the diner filling the air. Finally, Dad reached across the table and gripped my hand. Tight. I don't deserve how loyal you've been. I let him hold on, then pulled my hand back with a dry smile. Good thing loyalty doesn't run on your approval, huh? He actually laughed. A small, bitter laugh, but real. The first I'd heard in months. That night, as I drove back to Jason's apartment, I felt something shift. For months, I'd been alone in this war. Documenting, planning, waiting. Now it wasn't just me. Dad was finally on the right side of the board. Helene thought she had him isolated, wrapped tight in her little web. But she'd pushed too far, gotten too greedy. And now? She wasn't facing a grieving architect and his bitter son. She was facing both of us. And this time, we were playing offense. The next morning, Dad and I walked into Ashley's office with two goals: lock down his assets and put Helene face first into reality. He carried two bags, one stuffed with financial records, the other with heirlooms he'd quietly removed from the house while she was at her weekly spa appointment. He looked more alive than he had in months, like making the choice finally gave him his backbone back. Ashley didn't waste time. First order of business: freeze every joint account, then change passwords and revoke her access to the firm's equity paperwork. If she tries to move anything else, we'll have a record. Dad nodded and started dialing. For 2 hours, we cycled through banks, brokerages, and his firm's accountants. By the end of the session, Helene was locked out of the money pipeline. The hemorrhaging had stopped. That's when Ashley slid a folder across the table. Now comes the hard part. She's not going to accept this quietly. If you want her out of your life, Connor, it needs to be formal. Divorce petition is ready. So is the injunction freezing all marital assets. Dad picked up the pen. His hand shook for a second, then steadied. He signed his name clean across the line. The sound of pen scratching paper felt louder than anything in that office. I leaned back in my chair, smirking. Congratulations, Dad. You just stopped financing her European retirement plan. He cracked a humorless smile. Feels like I finally woke up. Ashley wasn't done. We need to confront her, but not at home. My office, neutral ground. She'll think it's just paperwork. That gives us control. Helene showed up 2 days later, strutting into Ashley's office like she was walking a runway. She thought it was just a signatures and scheduling thing and left her attorney on standby, too confident to bother bringing him. What's this about? She asked, glancing between us. Connor, you look pale. Did Alexander send you running again? It's Alex, I corrected. But nice try. Ashley motioned for her to sit. Mrs. Collins, thank you for coming. There are some financial irregularities we need to discuss. Helene sat, crossing her legs, clearly irritated. Financial irregularities? Connor, we talked about this. Travel deposits, consultants, standard stuff. Why drag me downtown like I'm some criminal? Ashley slid a stack of documents across the table. Let's review together. Unauthorized withdrawals totaling $150,000. Property in the Caymans under your sole name. Multiple new credit cards maxed in less than 3 months. Care to explain? Helene flipped through the pages, her face tightening. This is absurd. You can't seriously believe... Dad finally spoke. His voice was calm but firm. Enough, Helene. I saw the texts. I saw the property papers. I know what you're doing. For the first time since I'd known her, Helene actually faltered. Just a half second, but it was there. She recovered quickly, switching tactics. Tears welled in her eyes, voice trembling. Connor, he's poisoned you against me. He's always hated me. He can't stand that you moved on. This is his doing. I leaned forward, deadpan. Funny. I didn't make you Google how to move assets offshore at 2 a.m. That was all you. Her mask cracked again. Those were research notes. Save it, Dad cut her off. I spent my life designing buildings that could withstand storms. Turns out I should have been watching for termites. Ashley slid another paper toward Helene. Divorce petition. Court order freezing all assets pending investigation. You're officially done here. Helene's face hardened. Gone was the teary act. In its place was cold calculation. She stood, adjusting her blazer. You have no idea what you're doing. You'll regret this, Connor. Both of you. Dad met her stare without blinking. The only thing I regret is letting you in my house. Helene grabbed her bag and stormed out, heels clicking like gunfire down the hall. The silence she left behind felt heavy, but also clean. Dad exhaled, running a hand over his face. I thought she'd scream, cry, make a scene. She's already planning her next move, I said flatly. That look wasn't defeat. It was strategy. But she's out of resources now, and this time we're 2 steps ahead. Ashley nodded. We've got her pinned. Evidence, testimony, financials. If she tries anything, it'll only make our case stronger. Dad looked at me, eyes clear for the first time in years. Thank you. I should have listened sooner. I smirked. Yeah, well, better late than bankrupt. For the first time, he actually laughed. A real laugh. The sound filled the office like a victory bell. Helene thought she had him wrapped around her finger. She thought I was just the bitter son standing in the way of her payday. She didn't realize she was up against someone who knew how to build a case as tightly as she built lies. And now, the con artist was the one cornered. Helene didn't storm the gates after that meeting. She wasn't the type to go down swinging. She was the type to retreat, plot, and try to sneak in the back door when no one was looking. But this time, the door was bolted shut. With Ashley running point, every account she touched was locked, every credit line flagged, every asset frozen. For someone like Helene, that wasn't just a setback. That was suffocation. The legal machine churned forward, slow but devastating. Her history was dragged into daylight. Bankruptcies, aliases, past marriages. Michael Smith and the other exes stepped up, offering testimony. Her entire playbook laid out in court like a cheap crime drama. Helene had always thrived on secrecy. Now she was naked in fluorescent light, and she hated it. The judge didn't buy her victim act for a second. She tried crocodile tears, claiming I'd hacked her accounts, that Dad was being manipulated, that she was just a misunderstood wife. Then the forensic accounting team dropped transaction logs, the Cayman correspondence with a relocation consultant and an offshore attorney, and surveillance footage of her rummaging through my things. She walked out of that courtroom with nothing. No house, no firm equity, no retirement accounts. Just the clothes on her back and a reputation scorched across multiple states. For someone who measured worth in money and appearances, that was worse than prison. Dad, meanwhile, started putting his life back together. He stayed in my spare room at first, the irony not lost on either of us. The man who once told me to pack my bags was now crashing on my couch while we rebuilt. I didn't rub it in. I didn't need to. Every morning he woke up to my coffee pot instead of Helene's almond milk lattes was reminder enough. We spent weekends reclaiming the family house. Helene had stripped it bare of Mom's touches, but we brought them back piece by piece. I dug Mom's paintings out of storage. Dad replanted her garden himself, dirt under his fingernails for the first time in years. Every photo rehung, every flower bed restored, was like stitching up wounds she'd left behind. Dad also went back to the firm. Not full-time, he was done with 70-hour weeks, but consulting, mentoring younger architects, dipping into projects he actually cared about. Martin was thrilled. The Henderson Tower deal moved forward without Helene whispering in his ear about early retirement. It gave Dad something he hadn't had in months: purpose. Our relationship shifted too. For the first time in my adult life, he treated me not just as his son, but as his equal. Over beers one night, he said, "You didn't just save my money, Alex. You saved me from myself." I clinked bottles with him. "Don't get sentimental. You'll ruin my reputation." He laughed, but I could see the relief in his eyes. Helene, of course, didn't fade quietly. A few months later, I got an email from the DA's office in Arizona. She'd tried running the same con on a retired surgeon, but this time his daughter recognized the warning signs. Turns out she'd attended one of the financial exploitation workshops I'd started hosting on the side. Helene had walked straight into a trap she didn't even know I'd helped build. The DA wrote, "Your work made a difference. She's facing charges now, and the family thanks you." That hit harder than I expected. Helene hadn't just been our problem. She'd been running this scam for decades. Cutting her off wasn't just revenge, it was prevention. As for Dad, he's in a good place. He reconnected with old sailing buddies Helene had frozen out, and weekends on the water are back on the calendar. He even dipped a toe back into dating. Slow, cautious, but healthier this time. The first time he mentioned grabbing coffee with a widow from the hospital board, he looked nervous, like he expected me to judge him. I just shrugged. As long as she's not Googling Cayman property laws, go for it. He laughed so hard he nearly spilled his drink. Me? I stayed in Boston. The experience made me double down on my career, pivoting my cyber analysis work toward fraud detection. There's money in exposing scammers, but more than that, there's satisfaction. Every time I flag a shady transaction or catch a financial predator mid-grift, it feels like punching Helene in the face all over again. One evening, Dad and I sat in Mom's restored garden, the sunset painting the sky just the way she used to love. He turned to me, serious. "I failed you, Alex. I chose wrong. I let her drive a wedge between us." I looked at him, cool and steady. "You slipped. Happens to the best. But next time, stand your ground before someone else has to do it for you." He nodded, the lesson landing. That was all I needed. Helene thought she'd erased my mom, drained my dad, and pushed me out. Instead, she ended up exposed, broke, and irrelevant. She wanted checkmate. What she got was her own king toppled in the middle of the board with the whole world watching. And me? I walked away with something better than revenge. I got my father back, sharper and wiser than before. Funny thing about parasites, they think they're predators. But once you shine a light on them, all they do is scatter. Helene's light burned out. Ours didn't. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way.